Hello everybody, we're doing chapter 10 on muscle. Now remember when we did the tissue, we learned about muscle, different types of muscle, cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle, and smooth muscle. They all share excitability. You're going to learn this word, action potential, which is a nerve impulse, electrical impulse that causes muscle to contract. Excitable, contractibility, it involves actin, myosin, ATP, and calcium. They all need to work together for muscle to contract. Elasticity is when the muscle relaxes and it relaxes and becomes long again. Extendability is when the muscle is able to stretch. So here's what some of the muscle is for. Movement, all these. That's what muscles are for, okay? So let's look at the anatomy of the muscle. So here is the tendon part that's attached to the muscle. This part is called the aponeurosis. And here is a muscle. The muscle is surrounded by a sheath of connective tissue called the epimyosin. Inside the muscle, you see a little section. One of these is called a muscle fascicle. Now inside the fascicle, it is surrounded also by a sheet of connective tissue called the perimysium. Don't confuse it with epimysium. Perimysium. And the endomysium is the inside in the fascicle. And inside of them, got a little thing like these. These are called a muscle fiber. Okay. Inside the muscle fiber, we have this thing called a sarcolemma. Sarcolemma. So we're going to study one of these, a muscle fiber. So where we saw sarcolemma, sarcoplasm is the same as on a cell. It has cytoplasm. Okay, sarcoplasmic reticulum, same thing as in the cell. You have cytoplasmic reticulum, and this is the sarcoplasmic reticulum. This part holds calcium, and it releases calcium and stores it. T-tubules are over here, but it's cut off. I'll show it to you several slides from here. Myofibril and myofilament, we're going to look through those. Myofibril is here, and then the myofilament, we'll look through those in several slides later. So inside muscle, of course, muscle needs to move, contract, so it needs a lot of mitochondria. Okay, so we're going to study one of these from a Z, we call it Z band or Z disc. Okay, it's a unit of muscle fiber. We're going to call it's called sarcomere. Okay, one unit is called sarcomere. And we saw the term actin and myosin. Actin are these thin green one. Just remember, thin is actin. And the myosin are these big ones. So from the Z disc to the Z disc, that's one unit of sarcomere. One unit of sarcomere. Okay. So between where there is a clearer section, okay, where there's only actin in here, okay, it's called the I band. Where there's only myosin, it's called the A band. And in the middle is the H zone, where it will, see, these will shorten and contract. Okay, between here and here, when the muscle contract, it sort of does one of these. It goes slide. Okay, so that sliding little section is called the H zone. Okay, M lines right here is where the thick myosin, okay, filament, so it's here. So again, these mesh-like looking thing is a sarcoplasmic reticulum. Myofibril. Myofibril is thousands of these sarcomere together. It's called the myofibril. So one of these guys. Okay. Myofilament, again, we'll look at it several slides from here, I think. So again, how it works. These green thin one is called actin, and these purple ones are thick. Okay, they're called the myosin. The myofilament we talked about right here. Myofilament contains actin, troponin, tropomyosin, and myosin. It is the binding site of the actin. Binding site of the actin. Okay, so the myosin, okay, this is the head of the myosin. It will hook onto these guys and pull. Another one will hook onto another one and pull. So that's how it makes it slide. So it hooked onto that and slide. Hooked onto that and slide. And when it slides closer and closer, the M line becomes closer and closer, which is the H zone. Okay, gets closer and closer. Right here. As they get closer, these gets closer. So how do muscle contract? It uses electrical and chemical at the same time. Actin and myosin will slide past one another, and the sarcomere, which becomes shorter. Now again, the sarcomere is this guy. From the Z to the Z, it gets shorter. That's a muscle contraction. So it all starts with a neuromuscular contraction. All starts with nerve coming from your brain. So this is, at this moment, this is a motor nerve. So motor nerve tells things to move. So this is voluntary. This is a motor nerve or neuron. Okay. So as you can see, the end of the motor nerve, okay, is not actually connected to it. So there's a little gap called a synaptic cleft. Synaptic cleft. Or this junction is called the neuromuscular junction. Neuromuscular junction. So from the nerve to the muscle, okay. And inside here are the chemical signal. So first there's electrical signal coming through. Then it will release the nerve chemicals called acetylcholine. Releases into the junction. Once the acetylcholine comes in here, attaches to the receptor, then it will cause the sodium channel to open, and so on and so forth. We will have an action potential. Okay. So synaptic vesicles are these guys. Remember, we learned vesicle in the cells. It releases it in there. So a membrane potential, these are some of the numbers. Needs to go from -60 to about -90. So you can see it moving. Okay, the electrical charges because of the sodium difference. So in order for contraction to occur, there must be excitation. So this thing is called action potential. Muscle and nerve can use this to generate their own electrical signal called the action potential. So the electrical signal going through the nerve in the muscle is called action potential for it to move. Okay. Again, how does it work? So the acetylcholine diffuses across the synaptic cleft. So ACH stands for acetylcholine. Goes across there. It attaches to the receptor, causes the sodium channel to open. Okay. So here's that difference. Understanding diffusion. So it diffuses across. There is more sodium ion on the outside of the cell, and the inside of the cell is more negative. Okay. So you can predict what happened. The membrane potential will become less negative. Okay. Then it becomes closer to 0. Okay. This is called depolarization. Depolarization. Okay. Depolarizing is when it's about to fire. Okay. Here are the T tubule we saw. Remember, we saw these mesh-like. It's the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It stores and releases calcium. Okay. It opens up the calcium. So remember in the beginning of the slide, in order for muscle to contract, it needs calcium, ATP. Okay. So here's where calcium comes from, sarcoplasmic reticulum. So depolarization of the membrane, we saw what depolarization is. Okay. Triggers more sodium, okay, channel to open, and you start an action potential. The action potential actually then travels into the T tubules, enter the T tubules, causing the calcium to open and enter so that there's muscle contraction. Here it is again, the motor nerve, acetylcholine comes through, calcium coming out. Okay, it could be from your bone, or, you know, of course this is showing the bone, but if you don't have enough calcium coming out from the bone, remember we learned that as well, the hormones. Then it comes out from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and then it causes the actin to slide along the myosin head. Okay. Relaxation. As long as there's ATP and calcium, okay, and it will relax. And we're going to see it in a couple of slides, I think. Relaxation occurs when the motor neuron stops signaling. So there's no more signal coming through. Whatever is left over will be degraded. Okay. Sarcoplasma, sarcolemma, and the T tubule will repolarize. Repolarize is like recharging. Depolarizing is firing. Okay, so it's recharging again. Calcium is pumped back to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and this require ATP. And then the tropomyosin will cover the actin so that the myosin cannot bind anymore. Okay, it will cover it. It cannot hook onto it. Okay. So here is again how it works. Okay, you see how this is when it's resting. The myosin head is not attached to the actin. It's not sliding. So here's contraction. The myosin head hook onto the site of the actin and pulls it closer to the midline, the H zone, making the H zone shorter. Okay. Here's where ATP comes in. So the sliding of the actin along the myosin shorten the sarcomere, right? It makes it shorter. That's a contraction. This is called, when you're repeating it, this is called a cross bridge cycle. Okay. Pooling of the myosin has the ADP and another phosphate. So you remember ATP is the requirement, the energy that we use. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. And here's the other phosphate. Okay. Adenosine diphosphate plus one more would be triphosphate. The ADP and the P are released. Okay. And this moves the myosin actin toward the M line. So it moves it closer. This is called a power stroke. Okay. Power stroke. ATP then bind to the myosin. This is how it is then released. If there's no ATP, myosin does not detach, so it gets hooked on. That's why when we die, our body goes into rigor mortis, stiffness, because our body only has a short amount of stored ATP. Okay, after it is used up, it doesn't make anymore. So our body is always constantly making ATP. That's why when somebody first